When you see that violence, look behind it. See why that spark comes out of the fire.
Started studying the history of Puerto Rican women within struggle. We can go back to 1898, when there was sisters, Lolita Rodriguez del Tio, Mariana Bracetti, who were involved in that struggle. We can go to the Nationalist Party and see the different women that were involved in that struggle. We can go to 1950 and the uprising in Jayuya, and that uprising was led in part by a woman named Blanca Canales. We can bring it up to 1954 and Lolita Lebron. She went into Congress when they were discussing the whole question of Puerto Rico, the whole status of Puerto Rico, and she went into Congress with 3 brothers and shot up the Congress with her little revolver. And she was a...
Little, big old 45. It was little at all.
She was considered a little...
One of the 5 congressmen.
She was considered a little Puerto Rican lady, And she went in there and she took out her flag after she'd taken out her revolver and said, "Que viva Puerto Rico libre."
To become a political person, a Puerto Rican revolutionary woman, is not something that happens from one day to another. It's a process, like all revolutionary politics.
For me to find out who I was, I had to go to the public library or some old Puerto Rican who tell me about who were our great men, our hero. Because in school they told, oh, George Washington is your hero. I know George Washington don't look like me. Or Patrick Henry, that was nice. Benjamin Franklin fly a kite. Betsy Ross designed the North American flag, but they don't tell me who designed my flag. The Puerto Rican flag. So for me to find that out, I had to put that book, I throw that book through the window twice. Because the teacher got me reading something that if you've got an ounce of intelligence, it's insulting to you, and I throw it twice. But I went finding out until I found out that my father was fighting, doing what he was supposed to be doing, because we were a colony, we were an enslaved people. The United States, or no one, had the right to enslave my country, to colonize my country, and that my father was right. So I became involved in that way in the same struggle of my father, and from father and son, we became compañeros too, in the struggle, compañeros in the struggle.
I decided that I wanted to contribute and work in the community, so I did that by working as a community organizer. And I thought there was the advent of the anti-poverty programs, and I thought that was going to be the answer. And it all sounded very beautiful. Maximum feasible participation of the poor. Well, this is it. Here we're going to bring about some change. And I learned early on, by the time I was 20, that wasn't the answer, because the programs in itself were not creating self-sufficiency. They were creating, our people became dependent on a system that wasn't doing anything for them. Then in that realm, I got involved in politics, electoral politics, and I thought, well, maybe if we had more Puerto Ricans in elected official positions, that would change. I found that to be a fallacy.
My name is Alejandrina Torres. I am a Puerto Rican prisoner of war. And the reason, because I call myself a prisoner of war, is because of the colonial relationship that exists between the United States over my country, Puerto Rico.
National liberation struggles are never won by sitting and demanding in sit-ins. Unfortunately, there is the question of armed violence. None of us, we're not advocates. We advocate, yes, revolutionary, what we define as revolutionary violence or revolutionary needs, and that is utilization of arms, because this country doesn't respect anything else.
So son Puerto Rican nationalists, Lolita Lebron, Irving Flores Rodriguez, Andrés Figueroa Cordero, and myself. Yeah. I myself decided that we had to do something to call the attention of the whole world about the reality in Puerto Rico. The United States has the money, has the little puppet all across the world, have all the means, We only have our life, okay? Our life. So we decided to put our life at stake as to clean the dignity of my country around the world, of my people. So we went to Washington and did some shooting inside the House of Representatives. Why there? Because they are the ones who control the sovereignty of Puerto Rico. They control, they impose over us the military service, everything, every law that's come and imposed in Puerto Rico from the Congress of the United States. So we went to the Capitol and made they smell some of their own medicine or taste some of their own medicine. So we went to prison. They give us 75 years to the men, and they were nice, 50 years to the women, see? Very democratic. 50 years to Lolita, and 75 to the men in Washington. From there, they took us to New York and charged us and other Puerto Ricans who did not have nothing to do about this with conspiracy to overthrow the government by force and violence. I mean, we might not be too smart, but we are not so dumb as to think that with 4 little guns you're going to overthrow the whole government of the United States, you know? But I guess, you know.
You can question me about the violence that I use, but at the same time, does it not bother, let's say, you or whoever the interrogator is about the violence that they perpetrate against my people and the atrocities that they have committed and the violence that is perpetrated, that is carried out every day? You know, just at the mere level of survival out there. Doesn't anybody, I mean, is some violence can be justified and other can be condemned?
I think it's important that people do not see us as these rigid, hardcore people. We're human, we're mothers. Carmen has a son, I have a son. And the beauty of our commitment to struggle is because we want a future for our kids. We want our children to live a better life, not to be dehumanized, and to have a different outlook of what life can really be about.
When you look at prisoners of war and political prisoners, they represent like the heart of our movement to a large degree. And what you have is that the government attempts to isolate the prisoner from the masses. And what that does is almost like removing your body from around your heart, which leaves your heart vulnerable to be destroyed. And so if they can isolate the community from the political prisoner or the prisoner of war, particularly once they're incarcerated, then they can generally do what they want to do with them.
Personally, I was subpoenaed by a grand jury and asked to give testimony to give information about what Black Panther Party members and Black Liberation Army members were doing, and I refused to testify before the grand jury. And I went underground as a result of it, ended up in prison doing 8 years, serving a 40-year sentence, of which I did 8 months and 8 years in maximum security, 3 years and 7 months of that in maximum security segregation. What became very clear during that time that I spent in prison was that people did not understand what was really happening with political prisoners. There's a very, very different level of treatment for political people who are in prison as a result of their political beliefs and affiliation than there is from people who are in prison as a result of criminal activities, whether it is because of the social crimes or whether it's economic crimes. There's a very, very different kind of treatment. Political prisoners and prisoners of war are not allowed to go to school in most cases. They have to fight for everything that is allowed to the worst. The person who could miss mass murder in our society gets better treatment than a political prisoner and a prisoner of war.
So what it is that the government is afraid of its political opposition, and so when it gets the opportunity, it tries to bury them within the confines of these institutions. And once they get them in the institutions, that is not enough. It then tries to isolate them, and it attempts to destroy them either psychologically or physically. And in many cases, as you know, prisoners have been killed, prisoners have been psychologically destroyed and tortured. And so this is the kind of treatment that people who are political get. Oftentimes they're sent thousands and thousands of miles away from home. Oftentimes they cannot get visits, what we would call visits that you can touch your visitor. You talk to them on a phone, you see them behind a glass, your visits are monitored, everything you say is recorded. Oftentimes there's prison guards who are standing there, you're under 20-hour surveillance, you cannot travel through the prison without an escort. All of these different kind of things designed to keep the prisoner in a state of flux, which is an attempt to destroy them and to have them renounce their commitment to the liberation struggles that they represent. But for the most part, they are failing, and I think that they will continue to fail.
The American justice system is a violent organization. We just have to look at the American jail system and see how violent the American judicial system is.
What the government is doing now is setting up prisons that are more and more repressive, trying to set up control units that are more and more repressive, where they create a situation where you have people living in a state of torture, 24-hour-a-day torture, with no recreation, no human contact, no fresh air, no contact with other human beings, that they do everything in their capability to try to remove that person from a normal human environment. And that it's not, I mean, it's not just imprisonment, it's imprisonment with a vengeance. And I think that we have to really struggle to close down all of these units that are really torture units.
What really is important about all of it is that you never, never surrender. And I never will surrender. I will never concede my will to struggle.
Our fighters and freedom fighters have been slain in the streets of Harlem and Brooklyn. Our people who stand up for our freedom has been railroaded to prison by the same legal system that tries to protect you today and that tried to kill you yesterday. So on behalf of my brothers in prison, on behalf of the Puerto Rican nationalistas who cannot sit up here, on behalf of the Native American political prisoners, and on behalf of the white American political prisoners, I say to you, brother, we love you and we will not give up the fight. 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 Amandla! Amandla!
Welcome to Behind Censorship, the assault on civil liberties. Lurking behind censorship is not just a furious conflict over a particular symbol, a strange hysteria that breaks out now and again. Behind censorship is a major political effort to shape, to control, to influence what people see, what they have available to them, what they think, and ultimately what they can imagine and do.
And now, recipe for repression. First, stir up fears about an uncertain future. Then, hit with accusations of obscenity. Make sure to silence